Oh, the breaking news today is that 10,000 illegal migrants have crossed the English Channel this year. This weekend, we saw Stop the Boats protests in Dover. It's been revealed that Labour plans to house asylum seekers in rental accommodation via a company called Serco. They're going to offer landlords 5 years guaranteed full rent deals to house asylum seekers at the taxpayer's expense. And I suspect there'll also be a refurbishment deal on top of that as well. Here is a map of areas covered by Serco contracts, which gives an indication of where these rental properties might be found. So, there appears to be an attempt to turn the northwest into an illegal migrant dumping ground. Lancashire has 14, Greater Manchester 10, there's another 15 across Cumbria, Merseyside and Cheshire. As you can also see, there's a lot in the Midlands. So we approached Serco's CEO in the UK and Europe, Helen Shaw, and also Anthony Kirby, who appears to be their overall CEO. I wanted to know if they felt that they were selling out Britain. I also wanted to know what guarantees they had when it comes to local British residents being kept safe from potentially very dangerous new arrivals. They said, "We are committed to ensuring those housed are safe while they await news on their asylum status. Our teams work closely with local community representatives to discuss any concerns they might have regarding asylum accommodation in their area." So note what we asked them, which is about can they prioritise and protect the safety of people already here? And they responded with, "We are committed to ensuring those housed are safe while they await news about their immigration status." Does that not tell you everything you need to know about their priorities? The other big problem here is what this will do to the UK rental market. Hard-working Brits, especially young Brits, are struggling to afford rent, let alone afford to buy a property. The average UK rent is now £1,326 a month. That's up 8.1% year on year. In England, £1,381 a month, up 8.3%. Wales, £785 a month, up 8.5%. Scotland, £998 a month, up 5.8%. Northern Ireland, £832 a month, up 8.1%. In London, £2,243 a month is apparently the average rent. That's the highest in the UK. So here are the potential negatives as I see it. Safety, introducing mostly Middle Eastern and African men into rental accommodation around the country poses obvious risks, especially to women and girls. Incentive, does this not make it even more appealing for illegal immigrants to come to Britain? Thirdly, social unrest. Can you imagine the protests, or even dare I say riots, if or when something goes badly wrong here? Fourthly, unfairness. Yet again, Brits seem to be at the back of the queue. Labour say this policy was started under the Tories, and they're right about that. But they are in charge now, and voters will never forgive them if they go ahead with this. So there's the thoughts of my panel this evening. We, of course, have Daily Express columnist Carol Malone. We've also got political commentator Andy Williams and former chairman of the Tory party, Sir Jake Berry. Carol, I mean, this seems like a potentially very dangerous and expensive sellout of Britain, doesn't it?
You know, Britain are in the absurd position of having their own money being used by the state to drive them out of the housing market. It is so unfair. You know, never mind that you mentioned young people there and looking for rentals, but there's also people who have been sat on housing lists for months, some people even years. And we know that Serco now have permission by the government to outbid councils for social housing, which is an appalling state of affairs. So people are going to be kicked off housing lists. It is appalling. You know, people, you know, Starmer keeps on trotting out this nonsense that he's going to smash the gangs. No, he's not. He's going into business with the gangs.
He's going to give them a house.
Because if I was sitting in Sudan at the moment, I'd be thinking, hello, I'm going to get myself to Britain now because I'm going to get a free house. And so people who've worked for years to afford a house, you mentioned £2,000 a month in London, people who come here illegally are going to get that for free. And it is beyond shocking. And I think some landlords, I was looking at social media today, are saying they won't ever sell out. But there will be many who will snap the government's hand off.
Well, it's going to get tricky.
Because they get... And also, this is a 5-year deal. So Starmer has got no intention of smashing the gangs if he's signing these landlords up for the next 5 years.
Well, Jay, you look at some of these potential areas anyway. The Northwest and the Midlands features disproportionately there. This is an attempt, I would argue, to what? This shows everything you need to see, I think, about the way that people view the Northwest, which happens to be where I'm from, and the Midlands. They view it as just, we can just dump them. We'll dump them there. Dump the illegals there. Ridiculous.
Well, I was really shocked to see that one of the areas that's going to get lots of these people is the town of Darwin in Lancashire. I happened to have been the Member of Parliament there till 12 months ago, almost now. And it's just completely wrong. Lots of these northern towns have their own challenges with deindustrialisation. Lots of them have lost their mills. Lots of them lost their big employers. And they are now, actually, because some of the things Boris Johnson did with levelling up, starting to recover. And they're going to have all of these problems pushed onto these towns. And when you talk to people, ordinary working families in Britain, their kids are still at home with them because their kids can't afford to move out and rent somewhere. You've got multiple generations living in small terraced houses in towns like Darwin in Lancashire, and they're going to see people who have no connection with the area, don't have necessarily shared values with people in that area, dropped in, gratis, everything paid, property maintained, don't have to pay the rent, council tax, get all their rent paid.
And what happens if, like the case of an individual in Hartlepool who'd been through, I think, 13 other countries, that was a Moroccan bloke, he then killed an old guy who was walking his dog, all right? I'm sorry, but this could be happening elsewhere. I'm not saying that they're all like this. I'm not saying every single one's a threat or a risk.
One's enough.
But one's enough. And Andy, I would just put this to you. How do you expect locals to react if a schoolgirl is raped or someone gets attacked or someone gets killed? I'm sorry, but there can only be... Keir Starmer can't stand up again and go, we need to all unite against the far right. Well, hang on a minute. You've plunked a load of people here and one of them's just killed someone.
Well, you're not going to find anyone defending any of those sorts of behaviours. I would say I defended it at the time, I'll defend it now. Keir Starmer was absolutely right to say what he said last year about the far right, because there was, and it wasn't everybody who was out protesting, but there was a significant element of far right protesters pushing burning bins into migrant hotels last summer, and that was disgraceful, and he was completely right to call it out. In terms of what's happening here, I'm afraid this is a sad but simple reflection of the reality of the current position. And the current position, Labour absolutely has, we know, because we can see in the numbers, that it has not made any progress on this issue so far.
It's got worse.
But it has got worse in the short term. Let's see what happens in the medium term.
It's going to get even worse.
No, but the reality is that at the moment we are spending, on average, £145 per night putting people up in hotels, and this is a tenth of the cost. So this is a hang on. I'm making a short term.
The cheap argument doesn't work
because
the cheapest way is not to let them in at all.
Exactly.
That just doesn't work. And why does this government feel it has a duty to house illegal migrants in houses and hotels? Why aren't we building dormitories like other countries do? Why do they have to be put up in luxury? That's what they say is luxury. Why do they have to have that? When we have our home, they have no duty to look after our homeless. They get turned out.
I think there is absolutely a question about making sure that we're building things like that, so that we don't have to.
They don't need luxury homes. They don't need to stay in hotels with room service. They just need to be put in a dormitory.
People are not staying in luxury hotels.
They're staying in four-star hotels.
They're staying in hotels.
Me and him don't stay in five-star. We stay in four-star when we travel. Right. So that's nonsense to say they're not luxury. They are.
And the other thing is, how can we live in a nation where we have British service personnel, veterans on the street?
Exactly.
That the government, all governments, Conservative and Labour, haven't managed to house, haven't managed to get off the seats. When you can turn up illegally in this country and be given a house the next day. It is an absolute disgrace. Why don't they put British veterans before illegal asylum?
Well, here. I went to a shipping container housing development in Ealing, and I spoke to the residents there. And some of them were victims of women were victims of domestic abuse, had a couple of kids. And they were told by the council, this is the only place we can house you at the moment.
That's a disgrace.
They couldn't get housed. Now, in the short term, those women just needed to get out of the situation they were in. So, for a few days, they were like, all right, yeah, okay. but they're still there, like a year or 2 years on.
So why aren't we putting
Well, that's
migrants in
shocking.
containers? And I mean,
Putting them in containers, lifting them, putting them on ships and taking them to Rwanda.
taking them out of the country. It's
But
outrageous.
Andy, when you think about the list of priorities for people, potentially, we've had veterans there. I would argue, women who are fleeing domestic violence. I would also just argue just Brits generally. Should they all not be a priority over people who've, potentially just come from Afghanistan or Eritrea?
Well, I don't really like thinking about it in that sort of crude hierarchy, because I don't think it's as simple as that. The people who are coming over on small boats, a lot of them we know are economic migrants, but not all of them are. Some of them are fleeing persecution in places. So how do we? No.
To be put up in luxury hotels. That's the bottom line. They need basic accommodation and safety. They don't need British taxpayers paying millions of pounds.
You do agree that they need shelter and some sort of basic dignity.
Genuine fleeing persecution needs safety, but we know that 80-odd% are not. We know that as economic
in France,
migrants.
which is a completely civilised
Safe country. Yes.
They only house 50% of migrants. They only house the migrants who say this. The reason you have these camps in places like Calais is if they say to you, where are you going? They go, I'm off to Britain. They say, well, in that case, we won't house you. Why everyone who comes to this country do we have to house them?
Well, actually,
and also, why when we've had things like the Bibby Stockholm barge, which wasn't particularly pleasant, was akin to a prison.
What do you mean it wasn't
akin to a
pleasant?
prison ship.
It was not.
Abolished. The Labour government has got rid of the Bibby Stockholm barge. It's got rid of people being housed in military camps, and it's putting them in expensive accommodation up and down the country. If you have an asylum-seeking family move in next door to you, maybe you've worked your whole life to pay your mortgage off. You have an asylum-seeker moving next door. They won't be paying anything. Blame Keir Starmer because it's his government.
Don't blame Keir Starmer, because this is just a continuation of Conservative Party policy for over a decade. The Conservative Party, when the Conservative Party were in government, were putting people.
Said he had a plan, Andy. Where's the plan?
Successive Conservative governments put asylum seekers in private rented housing. Chris Philp, who's a Shadow Home Secretary, who had the temerity today to come out with a statement and say this is a disgrace. He stood up in the House of Commons 4 years ago and said the way we solve this problem is to procure dispersed housing.
Gangs, then that's one of the reasons he got elected. He had no plan, and that's clear now.
I am very, very, very worried about what I regard, and I'm absolutely, in case anyone takes this clip out of context, I'm going to make one thing very clear. I am not in any way advocating any kind of civil unrest, OK? But I can look ahead here, play the tape forward, and to me it seems inevitable that something bad happens in one of these places where they've plonked a load of these people, and how do you expect locals who already maybe feel at breaking point to react? And then what's going to happen? You're all far right, are you? You all get locked up? It's a disaster waiting to happen.
And then the community has to deal with that, after the aftermath.
OK,
it's terrible.
so a Home Office spokesperson said, the list of local authorities Serco shared on its website for landlords is not a Home Office list, nor is it a list of any existing or future asylum accommodation. Serco is one of several companies contracted by the previous government 6 years ago to provide dispersal asylum accommodation in different regions, and this list simply appears to reflect the geographical list of local authorities covered by the Serco contracts at that time. We are restoring order to the asylum system and cutting costs of taxpayers by reducing the number of people who are required to accommodate through a rapid increase in asylum decision-making and the removal of more than 24,000 people with no rights over in the UK.